All right, we are up for our first session of what is going to be a wonderful and exciting day. I am very excited to introduce our first speaker. Some of you may recognize her from last year's summit, Dr. Wanda of NSF. She is the head of the Office of International Integrative Activities at the National Science Foundation. Throughout her tenure at NSF, she has served in a number of science and engineering policy, planning, and program capacities, including senior advisor to the NSF director, assistant to the NSF Director for Human Resource Development, Deputy Assistant Director for Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences, and Deputy Assistant Director for Education and Human Resources. She took the BA in Psychology as well as African American Studies, certificate from Princeton University, and has a PhD in Psychology from Stanford. She was awarded a Ford Foundation Fellowship, the 2005 American Psychological Association Presidential Citation, the 2006 Federation of Behavioral, Psychological, and Cognitive Sciences Richard T. Lutet Award, and the 2006 U.S. Presidential Rank Award for Distinguished Executive. I could tell you more and more about Dr. Ward, but I want her to get up and speak with us. Dr. Ward.
Well, good morning, everyone. You deserve medals for showing up on time, first of all, so kudos. Saw a colleague who had just flown in from the West Coast, and we commend her for her commitment to broader impacts. Go California. I'm delighted to be here with you this morning. If I don't consume all of the time, though I likely will, I might pull out a harmonica or a ukulele. Just joking. We were teasing. So much time appears to be for this session, but you're such a committed and deeply knowledgeable representation of the community, so committed to these issues that we're positive that we'll have a good dialogue, and we are very much looking for a rich exchange of ideas. I think all of you will agree that it's hard, even at 8 o'clock in the morning, it's a hard act to follow Chancellor Nancy Cantor and President Freeman Hrabowski. I think we were all inspired and informed about some of the opportunities and the challenges that exist at every level in promoting and forging the frontiers, if you will, of, in this instance, broader impacts. This clearly is a topic of highest priority to the National Science Foundation, recognizing that we receive approximately 50,000 proposals a year, only a fraction of which we have the funds to support. I think the success rate is around between 20-25% lower in some areas of the foundation. Adherence and clarity about the essential criteria by which these proposals are judged is at the heart of what we do at the National Science Foundation. And so all along, and as Dr. Reno knows, last year I was very pleased to represent the Office of the Director at the first Infrastructure Summit, and I ran back to the foundation saying there's some very exciting things bubbling up in the community. And the foundation was very pleased when the network requested to host your second summit here in the area. We commend the work that the network is doing. We know that you all still have miles to go, but the start is very impressive. And I was really impressed by the wide representation of types of institutions that are participating in this network. And so in addition to commending Dr. Reno, the entire team, collaborative team, on the start that you're making, we at NSF are partnering with you, and we are closely observing your progress. There are many other exciting developments taking place with regard to broader impacts. And I'd like to give you just a snapshot this morning, a broad snapshot, and that's quite by design. But we want you to see and to hear from the various levels of representatives at the NSF who are deeply also engaged in this topic from our end. And we're especially pleased by your afternoon speakers from whom you will hear. I certainly want to acknowledge my colleagues in IIA who have worked closely with me and supported supported IIA and led our thinking relative to our stewardship. The IIA office produces every year the merit review report that is submitted to the National Science Board and oversees the Committee of Visitors reports and things like this. So this aspect of stewardship of our portfolio is especially important to us. And so you'll hear later from Dr. Diane Spresser, representing IIA, Dr. Kathy McLeod, who's also worked with broader impacts in IIA, could not be here with us this morning. But all of my colleagues, I want to acknowledge you and thank you for your efforts this morning. And so looking at the broader context, we thought that the contextual framing for this presentation would be clearly and is clearly grounded in NSF as an innovation agency at the frontiers of knowledge. Collectively, we need to be inventive in how we conceptualize broader impacts such that the requirement is viewed as essential to supporting the fundamental and research funded by NSF. It is this type of collaboration between the foundation, NSF, and America's colleges and universities, nonprofits, and other partners that can address the challenges associated with broader impacts and promote solutions for connecting the federal research investment in science and engineering with outcomes aligned with the core work of NSF. Our strategic plan, as you know, is just released last month, Investing in Science and Engineering and Education for the Nation's Future. It lays out two strategic goals that embody the dual nature of NSF's mission to advance the progress of science while benefiting the nation. That being transforming the frontiers of science and engineering and stimulating innovation and addressing societal needs through research and education. And to bridge the gap between those strategic goals and measurable outputs, the strategic plan establishes a set of strategic objectives for each strategic goal. For the purpose of this summit, we can leverage the strategic plan by raising some important questions for broader impacts activities. For example, how do we aggregate broader impacts outcomes to communicate broadly the progress of science? How can we use, for example, data visualization tools to show how scientific fields have contributed to national security? How do we organize and implement a portfolio of awards to address an educational grand challenge? These are just a few broader impacts questions related to organizational transparency in terms of why we fund, what we fund, and good stewardship that yields an excellent return on the investment for knowing what to do to promote national competitiveness and leadership in science and engineering. In terms of our core values, you all are very familiar with these. I won't go through them in any detail, but the core values of the foundation remain clearly scientific excellence, organizational excellence, learning, inclusiveness, accountability for public benefit. Increasingly, the federal investment is being held to a higher standard of accountability, and your efforts help us quite significantly demonstrate the value of the investment. In terms of the merit review overview, you know very well, and I'm not going to go through this in any detail, but you know that the foundation is acknowledged for its emphasis on funding merit review research for the vast majority of all awards that we make. Our approach to merit review is recognized internationally as the gold standard for review, assessment, and selection of projects. You all may have heard of the Global Research Council, which was established back in 2012, and I think there were heads of some 50 countries within a very short window of invitation that attended that first Global Research Council summit at NSF. And the topic, the express focus topic of that entire first summit was merit review. And we heard over and over again how many of our global partners look to NSF for making awards or supporting science, STEM research and education at the highest levels. In the interest of time, I'm sure this group has to be familiar with what the criteria. If not, we sort of have to start over. We can go back to base zero, but I won't go through this in any detail. Intellectual merit and broader impacts. And you know that some of the changes that were made recently by the National Science Board retained both of the review criteria, but added these principles that both criteria had to address with the intent of ensuring that important attention would be paid. And you know that part of the story behind needed clarification about what PIs were supposed to write to in their proposals included a veritable laundry list of activities that counted as broader impacts, and some thought that they had to address all of these in order for broader impacts to make their proposal competitive. That was our response to we took it seriously, but we understood that there needed to be greater clarity in what was expected, and we really are looking to you, the community. That's why we're so excited about working with you in this network, because this is a problem that together we have to solve till we get it right. Just to give you a few representative broad stroke examples of some of the things that are taking place, it's important to know that just as we're expecting institutional leadership for broader impacts, we're engaging in better guidance to the field. Time won't permit, obviously, a full representation of all of the efforts of the foundation and what's being supported, but I do think it's important, as I said, for you to see some of the things that are going on. The NSF Merit Review website is maintained by the NSF Policy Office and aims to keep the community well informed of changes and requirements. Now, I share this slide as a reminder of the prominence of broader impacts in the proposal and post-award phases of the grant process. Project summaries have to contain a separate statement on broader impacts, as you know. Project descriptions have to contain a separate section with a discussion of broader impacts. Proposing organizations have to certify that organizational support will be made available as described in the proposal to address the broader impacts and intellectual merit activities. Annual and final reports have to address activities related to the broader impacts criterion that are not intrinsic to the research. Even further, proposers and broader impacts professionals have to familiarize themselves with the merit review principles and criteria as described, and you probably know this chapter and verse, the GPG chapter on this topic. Now, and you'll hear from various of our colleagues throughout the course of today and tomorrow As I indicated, there's some very interesting things taking place in a number of the directorates across NSF. What we all don't have a full handle on, even within the foundation, is a coherent picture of what each other is doing, so that just as you're looking to aggregate things up at the institutional level, we're looking to get a better feel on what it is that we already have underway and how to integrate and cohere that in a fashion that allows for the exemplars in the different parts of the foundation to continue, but to exchange best practices or share what's working and not working, so that at the agency level, NSF itself is strengthened more fully. So the Directorate for Geoscience, and you saw Dr. Cantor's slide last night, I thought doing a beautiful job of how broader impacts is infused throughout all of the directorates at the National Science Foundation. And I kind of chuckled because I knew of my intent to share just specific examples across all of the foundation to fuel further discussion throughout this two-day summit. But Geoscience has undertaken several activities, including surveying panelists to identify areas of importance to the geo community, as well as best practices and effective approaches. Summer interns and AAAS fellows in geo have reviewed annual reports to conduct qualitative and quantitative analyses of the focus and outcomes of broader impacts. As is true for nearly every directorate, GEO is implementing events for junior investigators in both geo research and education, reinforcing the integration of research and education. The Advisory Committee on Environmental Research and Education, which up until this year was managed and overseen by GEO, continues to include broader impacts issues as important discussion topics in its expert advice to NSF about how to continue to forge the frontiers. You'll hear from a representative of that committee on tomorrow. With regard to EHR, Education and Human Resources, as you all are familiar, you'll hear from our colleague, EHR has funded resource centers to leverage technology and informal science education to build communities of experts to address broader impacts. Its early efforts included an award to the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research, UCAR, to use the communication tools of the National Science Digital Library community to advance discussion and understanding of broader impacts, including strategies for implementation. More recently, the Center for the Advancement of Informal Science and Education received funding to connect researchers and STEM-based professionals with activities, resources, and educators to address outreach and broader impacts learning goals. Even within international and integrative activities, the Science and Technology Centers, as many of you may know, is the only and possibly the largest funded NSF center. The uniqueness here is the STCs fund science, fund research and education in all fields of science and education, whereas many of our other very prestigious centers are domain specific, if you will, MRSECs, ERCs, et cetera. And these centers, within these centers, each is expected to address at least 3 components of broader impacts in their annual and final reports. Specifically, they have to report on activities in the areas of education and outreach, diversity and knowledge transfer, diversity and knowledge transfer. Within the Center for Science of Information, it was reported, for example, that 26% of the faculty are women and underrepresented minorities. 20 new modules and 6 new courses are in development. 4 multi-institutional interdisciplinary student research teams of postdocs, grad, and undergraduate students from 7 universities are being supported. Over $1 million from industry research collaborations took place in 2013, and over 176 invited talks and 250 conference proceedings took place in 2013. While I only highlight one STC, several other features on the rolling slideshow of this summit that you'll see over the course of the day feature other such broader impacts covered here. Some of the other things, and this is a very interesting one, we think. We heard Nancy talking about last night how important communicating with the public is in engaging and attracting the support of science and engineering, as it were. Another very powerful effort in communications has been the Science Messenger Workshop, funded by the EPSCoR program in collaboration with our Office of Legislative and Public Affairs. These workshops usually attract over 100 participants, attracting principal investigators, early career researchers and engineers, graduate students, postdocs, and public information officers who would like to learn more about communicating science to news media and the general public. The event is designed to provide one-stop shopping for those seeking to reach a broader public about their work. Over the course of a full day of training, participants learn how to craft a message and deliver it in a variety of media outlets. They also have the opportunity to experience live interview training, to develop writing and new media skills, to hone their public presentations, and even to produce video. For the more ambitious researchers selected to participate for a second half day of this event, their messages are developed further and translated into an appropriate medium to be taken public. Some scientists leave the workshops with publishable blog posts, op-eds, YouTube videos, and many more. I'll kind of roll through many of these very important activities that are supported in other parts of the foundation. SCIES has supported a collaborative effort to help the SCIES computing research community on how to effectively integrate broader impacts activities into their research projects. An important outcome of this project was the creation of this website to educate the SCIES community about the NSF broader impacts criterion, including how to evaluate this criterion as part of a research project. It's also important to promote an integrative approach in implementing broader impacts. However, I don't want to overlook broader impacts as the research itself. And again, many of you hopefully are familiar with some of these activities also. Broader impacts may be accomplished through the research itself. In other words, it's important for scientists to know that when their research will address national priorities or national initiatives, the research itself represents broader impacts because it's exploiting new concepts and strategies to advance national health, prosperity, welfare, and defense. Some of you will recall this slide. We have numerous investment priorities of what we call. Our budget was just submitted. The President's budget was submitted to Congress a few months ago. These are the several priorities that we will find in the NSF budget 2015 submission. Clearly, I'm not going to go through all of these, but just to highlight in various ones of them the clear relevance to broader impacts that's inherently included in the conceptualization of the project. Some may be familiar with the President's BRAIN initiative. We're participating, NIH, DARPA, and several other agencies. But you can see here at the first line, to help improve understanding of the brain, will promote brain health, enable engineered solutions that enhance, replace, or compensate for lost function. You can see the clear societal relevance infused in many of these, in all of these actually, priority investments. With regard to C's, a longstanding priority investment, the focus of that is to inform and help create a sustainable world. Cyber-enabled materials manufacturing and smart systems, again, with a direct downstream tie through addressing some of the pressing technological challenges facing the nation and to help promote U.S. manufacturing competitiveness. Some of you may be familiar with the Advanced Manufacturing Partnership or the National Robotics Initiative. NSF is an integral partner in such efforts. Even in CIF 21, Cyber Structure Framework is in the process of advancing scientific discovery and innovation through advanced cyber infrastructure, etc. Even with regard to one of our newer initiatives, I-Core, clearly has broader impacts. Improve access by NSF-funded researchers to resources that can assist in bridging the gap between the discoveries, the basic discoveries, and downstream technological applications, and in building, importantly, and sustaining a national ecosystem for innovation that supports the development of technologies, products, and processes that tangibly benefit the nation. SATSI, Secure and Trustworthy Cyberspace, leads quite significantly and is one of another major projects that seeks to protect the nation's information technology infrastructure from a wide range of threats that challenge its security, reliability, availability, and overall trustworthiness. Just to look briefly, last year we were pleased at the NSF to host and primarily lead the first, and I'm getting ahead of myself a bit to talk about the Gender Summit, but we led the first expanded conference in North America on gender from a couple of dimensions. The initial summits were held and continue to return to Europe, the European Gender Summit 1 and 2, but we thought it important to take this very significant opportunity relevant to improving the STEM enterprise, to take it abroad and to bring it. But we didn't want it to just be an NSF kind of activity or even a USA. And so we were successful in getting the collaboration with our counterparts in Canada and Mexico. And so the North America Summit was held here last November. Very successful summit, over 600 attendees from over 30 countries, with a couple of really important aspects of the summit, and that is the continued development and advancement of women in science and engineering, but quite significantly also greater infusion of the gender dimension into scientific and innovation content itself. And we were pleased to find a number of such efforts that directly related to those objectives and goals already being funded in NSF. But again, looking coherently and holistically at what we do as an agency is a very important activity. And you can see the range of topics that are being funded in different parts of the foundation. The previous one, I think, is funded by SIZE on broadband and universal connectivity. This one by biological sciences, molecular regulation of estrogen receptor gene expression in the adult brain, looking at the differences between male and female brains, for example. The influence of network structure on sex disparities in scientific collaboration, again, supported by the SPE sciences. The list goes on. Supportive communities, how gender impacts the Native American experience in STEM fields. Moving further, Broader impacts is supported through through the engineering directorate quite significantly. Notably, broader impacts advancing knowledge, technology transfer. A number of these programs, some of which you may be familiar with, are managed through the Industrial Innovation and Partnership Directorate, clearly taking the basic engineering research process towards what's called getting over the valley of death, if you will, or some of the efforts of these activities. Broader impacts transforming the scientific paradigm, the science of broadening participation, funded largely through the SBE Directorate. These efforts are capturing not only evidence for the need for diversity of thought for innovation, but are also revealing that emphasis on inclusion can transform scientific paradigms for talent development and national leadership in STEM. This transformation work challenges or expands existing social and behavioral science theories by supporting interdisciplinary collaborations to employ a variety of empirical approaches and methods to develop new paradigms to understand and address the underrepresentation challenge. At the frontiers of knowledge, this, we think, some very exciting work that's been underway for several years. As I mentioned, the Environmental Research and Education Advisory Committee has been doing, one of the members of that committee has been engaged in some very interesting work. We invited Dr. Susan Furman from Barnard to present to the congressionally mandated Committee on Equal Opportunities at our last meeting this past June. But the ERE Advisory Committee, as I said, is very seriously pushing the needle, if you will, or pushing the envelope on NSF's enablement of the broader impacts criterion, as is the Committee on Equal Opportunities in Science and Engineering and other parts of the foundation. Recent research is something that Susan has been working on and has indicated that by institutions, one of the major suggestions that's being made or recommendations is that institutions should create a culture that allows interdisciplinary researchers to thrive and advance more fully. And this is one of the paradigm shifts for proving to be a good practice, actually, for attracting women and minorities, since these underrepresented populations are much more likely and show considerable interest in engaging in interdisciplinary research and teaching. I would recommend this article to you, their 2007 article, Women, Minorities, and Interdisciplinarity, Transforming the Research Enterprise. Very interesting work being carried on there. Something else that you all have scheduled to talk about this year, as you did last year, the extent to which broader impacts plans and activities are transformative may require innovative measurement and assessment strategies. A quick review of websites reveals some interesting comments about evaluating broader impacts. For example, the University of Berkeley raised the following question: what benefits would accrue if the project is successful? Or the University of Montana pointed out that the broader impacts part of a project should be based on appropriate metrics which can be measured and reported. University of Pennsylvania is stressing that the emphasis on accountability is more critical than ever and is an essential component of all proposals to NSF. We do envision that renewed interest in evaluating broader impacts will also be a driver for new directions in the evaluation of scientific research and innovation itself. And so some of the findings that you all or discussions and recommendations that you all make on this front will be quite important for us all to hear, the foundation and the community at large. And so we are also looking to this community to help inform future decisions and funding opportunities regarding broader impacts. In general, the grant review process is receiving increasing attention nationally and internationally. I mentioned to you a moment ago and showed you snapshots of some of the work that's relevant and was showcased at the Gender Summit. Another one of the topics that we talked about there was merit review, because as I said at the GRC, the first GRC meeting, the entire focus was on merit review. And this just gives you examples of some of the issues and approaches to merit review that were discussed at the Gender Summit 3. We had participation from Europe, from Canada, NSF Foundation there, as well as our sister agency here, the NSF. In Europe, they say many funders now monitor demographic makeup of proposals and awards. European funders have developed a European peer review guide. European Science Foundation strives for gender equality on panels. In Canada, we were informed that at NSERC, they aim to have gender balance of reviewers reflect that in disciplines, 20% women on average. They provide training on implicit bias during orientation on panels, as we do here at NSF. They ask reviewers to emphasize quality and impact of prior research, not, just quantity. They allow PIs to identify causes of delays in their careers, which is very significant from a career-life balance point of view. For example, parental leaves, health problems, things like that. Here, more locally at NIH, they require a minimum of 30% women and 10% underrepresented minorities on panels. They promote the inclusion of women and minorities in human clinical studies, as many of you are aware. Even within my home office of IIA, we've taken up this topic of broader impacts in some of our retreats. At least the past 2 or 3 retreats, we've expressly discussed the topic of broader impacts. And some of the suggestions from my colleagues in IIA have included a Dear Colleague letter for funding to support the institutional infrastructure to address and assess broader impacts for societal benefits, and having a fall broader impacts workshop. We're definitely intending to do that in the next 6 to 9 months, as I shared a while back with Susan. We think that this summit can result in a broader impacts publication, and we can enhance the NSF website with resources shared at this meeting. Diane Spresser has some very interesting ideas about that activity. A tailored Broader Impacts Institute for stakeholders was another suggestion. And the AAAS fellow in IIA is conducting broader impacts analysis of the major research instrumentation portfolio. We're doing the same with the STC portfolio. For example, a future MRI Broader Impact Institute for early career researchers might be possible. In this regard, we'd be extremely interested in hearing any suggestions that you all might have to inform us about how we might advance our collectively interested broader impacts activity. You definitely, and as I'm sure you already are, encouraging your professional associations, and we could host broader impact seminars at various annual professional meetings. So this is just an initial set of some of the ideas that we've been brainstorming about, but as I said, we very much welcome your thoughts and your ideas for us in IIA. And so at this point, I'll bring out my ukulele. No, I'm teasing. I'll open it up now for any comments, any thoughts, any suggestions that you have for us at the NSF.
with a black Ford who said they were from our summit, left it in valet with the keys locked in it and running. So if that's your car, the license plate is FCB 6235. Please go see the valet. They're a little anxious about the running car.
That has definitely broader impact implications, right?
All right, so we have a roving microphone somewhere. Oh, it's being turned on right now. How many degrees does it take to turn on a microphone? Oh, how many reading glasses do we need to turn on a microphone? Jane's back there in the back. So we have several mechanisms for asking questions. We have had one submitted, so we'll start with that. At some universities, offices established to deal with BI initiatives are encouraging researchers to consider utilizing existing programs to fulfill the BI requirement. This has the potential to strengthen a limited number of focused efforts, increase impact of the programs, create a critical mass of program evaluation. However, there's pushback from NSF panels that these proposals are not favorable because they're not novel or transformative. Could you provide some feedback on this conundrum?
That was my question, too.
I will attempt to answer that. Freeman Hrabowski said something last night that reminded me of some questions that the audience raised last year at your summit, and Diane Spresser is our resident expert. You remember, same people may not be here, but Freeman was talking about integrating and better coordinating existing efforts. And we did that a few years ago. We piloted an effort for 2 to 3 years ago through the I-Cubed activity. I think we called it Innovation Through Institutional Integration. And so I think it's fair to say, not just because of the very tight success rates that I talked about earlier, it's fair to say that NSF has always recognized its primary role as being a catalyst for significant change, for really advancing the frontier, as opposed to, if you would, for lack of a better phrase, incremental changes. And I won't call it tinkering around the edges, because significantly incorporating broader impacts, even into existing programs, has value. But within these limited dollars, in which there's increased scrutiny on the value of the investment, the return on the yield, the more competitive activities are clearly going to be more forward-looking, frontier-setting, innovative, that can serve as exemplars for adaptation, contextually appropriate in many other settings. So that's the short of it, pushing the envelope.
I have a question.
So I wonder about when I hear from faculty who speak in absolute terms about broader impacts. They've heard one message from one person that says broader impacts doesn't really matter. And that happens across directorates, across people. And I'm wondering about the messaging within NSF to ensure that that people don't have the opportunity on one review panel to change, like the messaging that comes out of one review panel frequently goes all around the whole university as the message from NSF. And it's one of those things that the brilliance of broader impacts is its non-prescriptive nature and the ability to be creative and come up with these wonderful opportunities for, broadening impact, exactly what it says. But in that non-prescriptive nature, it also gives people the right to go all the way to the other end of the scale and say, it doesn't really matter, it's just the tiebreaker or something like that. So if you can comment about within NSF how you can corral all of these different review panels or somehow make the messaging not so absolute sounding, maybe.
Have you ever heard of the phrase herding cats? Well, we're not exempt from it, but you raise an extremely important point on a number of fronts and in the spirit of candor. First of all, in terms of checks and balances, theoretically, there are to be automated systems in place that if both criteria are not expressly addressed at the submission stage, they'll be returned summarily. That being said, you're talking about the ones that actually make it through to the system and get to the panel, presumably only to have a program officer or another panelist say, this just really doesn't matter. Unfortunately, that's not something that only happens with broader impacts, and it's something that, in the terms of the health of our organization, we always engage in getting the word out, getting champions for these important developments in our enablement of the STEM enterprise. But I think, as Nancy or Freeman said last night, you just cannot relent. He gave the example about, some of the things that the homogeneity pockets that he's finding on his own campus. We simply cannot relent. That's why we're excited about you all being here today, but there are training courses for managers, for program managers, program officers at the National Science Foundation, where this topic is expressly addressed. And there's language internal to the foundation about the criticality of ensuring that both criteria are fully considered and addressed. That being said, to be honest, I've even been on site visits of multi-million-dollar NSF-funded activities, and it's very clear that the funded awardee doesn't think NSF is very serious about whatever the requirement is for, and it's not a requirement for purposes of bureaucracy. It literally is intended to help strengthen, deepen, and broaden the STEM interview. But it's our responsibility as NSF employees and representatives, wherever we find the need for improvement, it is our obligation to clarify, challenge, take the issue to task. Some other instances, and my colleague can think of many, many others. Education. You heard talking about integration of research and education. NSF has been pursuing this for well over a decade. But if we don't stay vigilant about it, people will just throw in that education representatives so that proposal can look good and look like it's integrating research and education. STEM education hasn't always been valued as essential to a healthy STEM enterprise. Social behavioral sciences, the integration of the social sciences with the natural and physical sciences to literally inform from the beginning the thinking and the development of grand challenge ideas, etc., is something that is still challenging. And so unfortunately, even with broader impacts, there's still work to be done. But again, we are obligated, wherever we see it occur, at whatever stage that we at NSF see it occur, it is our obligation to adhere to it ourselves, and certainly to clarify and call to task at the review, at the panel review. All of us have been in panel reviews where questionable language, innuendo are placed, and fortunately, it's always interesting and exciting to hear other panelists who are very professionally and collegially called to task, the importance of something, an idea being fully considered. That stop out that we talked about, explanations of why they're significant stop outs in one's career, this is a really serious issue with regard to career-life balance considerations, birth, adoption, elder care, health reasons, one's own health reasons, and realizing that our objective and goal is to ensure a robust and vibrant STEM workforce. And so if you're finding ways to weed out people when they have perfectly justifiable considerations, and especially if they're coming back in with some really exciting ideas, why do we want to weed them out? We want to think more inclusively. This is clearly a problem also in the area of broadening participation. While broadening participation is very relevant, clearly relevant in one of the elements of broader impacts, we do know that broader impacts is a larger umbrella domain. So that's my initial take.
So I know that there's a perception that a lot of researchers don't sort of buy into the value of broader impacts as something that's important for them to do. I actually don't see that much. Most of the faculty and virtually all of the postdocs and graduate students that I work with completely see the value of it and actually are really interested in doing it when they have the time to do it and doing it well. But the problem that I encounter is that most of them just feel that they're not prepared to do a good job with it because they don't receive training in that and they don't know how to do that. And unless they're fortunate enough to be on a campus where there's an office that supports that and gives them training, they really don't know where to go with it. So they feel like they're spinning their gears a lot. So I was thinking about how the NIH requires graduate students who are on training grants to do an annual workshop, training workshop in bioethics, which not only prepares the students to know more about the topic, but sends a really strong message that the NIH values that. And I was wondering if there had been discussions within the NSF to do something similar where graduate students or postdocs or anyone on an NSF grant of any sort that's receiving training is required to, or at least has the option of attending an annual workshop where they learn, here's what broader impacts is, here's how you put together a program, here's how you assess it, here's how to do something that's valuable as opposed to something that really isn't going to make a big difference. It seems like that would be one way for the NSF to really support broader impacts and send the message that it's important to them. So I'm just wondering if there's been discussions like that.
I think that's an excellent idea. To my knowledge, we're not doing it now. The closest that comes to mind to me, and it's totally different, is the hard-won battle on the requirement of the mentoring plan. But that's totally different from this topic. The analogy is that just as we have included or made policy statements about things important like mentoring plan, I think it's postdoc mentoring plan, something like this might well be considered, so it's worth putting forth as a recommendation.
Hi, Wanda. I'm Bruce McFadden from the University of Florida.
Good to see you, Bruce.
Nice to see you. Thank you for your presentation. I agree with what you just said about the younger generation. The next generation gets it about broader impacts. I think that's where we need to focus in terms of our training and development. My question, though, is a simple one. I was interested in your slide early on in your talk that showed representative activities of broader impacts, and I'm wondering, is that in the new guide, or where can we have where can we find that one slide, the information in that one slide?
Well, you can find it on the slide.
Okay, so are your talks...
I know that there is a list with... Is it on the website? We believe it may be on the website.
Okay.
But there is a representative list of activities. In the past, we found that that created confusion.
It
right?
did. Yeah, so I use the 2007 Dear Colleague letter when I teach my class, and that's with the five categories. That's very helpful. And then with a new guide that came out last year, it sort of muddied the water in terms of how the students understood what to do. They get it that it's not sort of a list of you have to do one of a 1 through 5, but it's really helpful it's helpful for them if they understand representative activities as examples. So I think your slide early on in your talk is very helpful.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure this is at least posted, but we're checking to see if it is posted somewhere on the website. Good to see you, Bruce.
Hi, my name is Barbara Pearson from University of Amherst.
Yeah.
University of Massachusetts in Amherst.
There will be a test later, Barbara, about your home institution.
I've got to represent.
No, I understand.
And I work in a research development office, and my portfolio is broader impacts and helping people do it. And as I say, we have some people who have been attacked, right, for their science. And they get it, that, you know, and a couple of young people who say, I'm not going to roll over and let him call my science a boondoggle, right, and get up there and explain. But the part that I really struggle, where I struggle, is on these people and who have these very, very abstruse topics, very abstract topics. And I know it says it doesn't have to be, you know, when you go to integrated, it can be complementary to. But I have these people who say, I can't even explain this stuff to my graduate students, you know. And, I mean, but they feel that they need to do the thing. So I was hoping that I could find some more examples of innovative ways to integrate things that are really challenging to integrate. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like these statistical models that it's just really, you know, so I try and get them to do some kind of education or something, but that would prepare someone to do what they're going to do. But that's as far as I can get.
Well, that is a major objective of this summit. And I think you're going to have discussions in some of your breakout sessions just around this. I'd be interested also in hearing design principles. As you know, sometimes we make the distinction between design principles versus best practices only. And I think the dialogue over these couple of days will hopefully provide insight onto the very interesting question that you raise. But I think all scientists are being encouraged now, no matter how basic or how abstract your scientific pursuit happens to be, there is a need to be able to communicate it to somebody. I would imagine, especially your students, you know, but I appreciate, you know, the point that you're raising. I wanted to return to Bruce's point, because I almost responded to our colleague here, that there might be, you know, part of it might be a generation issue, that some just absolutely get it while others don't. That could be relevant to the new PI, older PI, early career PI, older PI, but I was reluctant to throw that out there, though I think that there is some truth to it, because often some of the very best champions that you can find are those who in the past didn't necessarily pick up a new opportunity, if you will, but when they see the value of it, their leadership propels them and they make headway, you know, in unique and novel ways. But I certainly do think there is some consideration for the early career scientists really being champions.
Good.
Okay. Could we get the mic?
Sorry, Joe.
There is at the NSF website a section on merit review frequently asked questions dated January 14. And I think addressing the earlier question about what happened to the document that contained examples illustrating activities likely to demonstrate broader impacts, the response from NSF is, the list of examples has been removed as of January 14. NSF does not wish to provide undue influence to proposers regarding what their likely broader impacts activities might be or imply that the exemplary activities are in any way prescriptive. But there is a long list of FAQs there that may be of some help.
Thanks, Diane.
So
I think I had the mic next anyways. Thank you for your presentation. I'm Susan Carter from the University of California, Merced, and I'm in the Office of Research Development there. And I wanted to follow up on a few of the comments around the new generation. I sometimes see that the new generation, the junior PIs, have a better understanding of broader impacts, at least in terms of what they think that broader impacts is. But my comment is first of all, that I think there's a view of it that's more narrow than is really intended, and certainly than is more narrow than what was reflected in your excellent presentation, which I thought was very helpful. I'm going to take a lot of that back because it's seen as education and outreach, and at my institution we see it as being a much broader broader impacts, and that is the part where they're getting a really mixed message. And one of the things I think from their colleagues, and sometimes from their senior colleagues, one of the things I wanted to mention in that regard, if you wanted to look at assessment and training, you might actually look at the career, the NSF career, because I am finding that the PIs think that the educational component of the career is the broader impacts. And I think that that's a mistake, but I don't know how it plays in a review process, but in terms of what I believe the NSF intends broader impacts to be, I believe that's a mistake. I recently was at a career training panel in which a group of past recipients of the Career Award were talking to junior faculty who were interested in it. And out of the 4 panelists, they were all asked at the beginning of the panel to describe their proposal and what they proposed and, you know, their area and that type of thing. And out of the 4 panelists, 3 said, well, here's what I propose for my science, and here's what I'm doing, and here's what I propose for my educational activities. And 3 of the 4 said, but I really haven't gotten around to doing it yet. And that was a little distressing, and I think sent the wrong message to the audience that we're trying to work with to really integrate broader impacts. So you might want to think about that as an area both for assessment and additional training, that it would be helpful so that the career proposal is not just a way to make it easy to do broader impacts. And I think there may be some perception among junior PIs that that's the case, if that aspect of it, the educational aspect, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, it does, and it's very interesting. I don't know about, in terms of assessment, one possibility is, you know, more vigilant monitoring through annual reports, for example, just to check and make sure that both, first of all, what's been proposed is actually being carried out. This issue about the education being a broader impact is tricky. I think it's tricky. I'll stop there because I'll stop there. But some things are by definition have broader impact, and I can't quite parse now whether that's the case for education or not.
In the interest of making sure that everybody gets to ask their questions, please try to keep your remarks brief and focus on our questions.
Or I'll go to the ukulele. I'm teasing. I'll stop the ukulele jokes, okay?
Hi, I'm Suguna Rachakonda from Kent State University. Hello.
Yes.
My question is regarding the boilerplate ideas for BI. And I saw on the list it's technology transfer is one of them, and knowledge transfer is one of the ideas for it. But the question is, when young faculty are applying for, say, NSF Career Awards, when they only think about their projects as transformational, which is the first mission of NSF, innovation, though it's one of the missions, is not considered, because innovation and tech transfer are related. But since these faculty are in the first few years of their career, they consider tech transfer to be a detriment to their BI when they're doing their first proposals. When they're in their 10th year of career, or when they're a full tenure professor, then they think of it. So how do we integrate? Because I'm the director of tech transfer at Kent State University, and I want faculty members to start thinking about this. They think translational is NIH, transformation is NSF, therefore tech transfer doesn't come in. Your comments on that?
What's interesting to me about that, and you've articulated that issue very well, is I'm reminded of our newer program, I-Core. Now, the point is not to ensure or to fund the actual tech transfer, but to bring together, as well as newer elements, the investments that NSF has already made, for example, on college campuses or through programs like SBIR, and to help get closer to that bridge of crossing over. So I technically don't know how best to respond to this. We're not a transfer agency. I mean, it's something called the Department of Commerce, right? But we are moving towards a continuum of more seamless development to transfer, if you will. I would suggest our colleague will be here tomorrow morning, the AD from engineering, and I think that's an excellent question to put to promote Kargankar.
I have a question for you. Can you go back to your previous slide? I am very excited about the things that are on this list. And when you mentioned a BI publication series, a Dear Colleague letter, I saw eyes start to light up, and people are excited. So what I would like to know is how this community can help NSF and help you, because you're spearheading this effort, how it can help NSF move the idea and the spirit of broader impacts forward.
Well, we already have plans for you. We actually do have plans for you. Let me reserve that until tomorrow, because I think that will be spoken to on tomorrow. But we're glad that you're resonating to the possibility of some of these. But that will be presented, that will be addressed in a presentation tomorrow morning. Don't forget.
Thanks for your presentation, Dr. Warden. My name is Ari Daniel. I'm a science reporter based in Boston. And I was curious whether there's anything in the works, or maybe something already out there on the NSF website or elsewhere, where there's kind of like a listing or a description of really innovative or engaging broader impact examples from across disciplines, just so that if I were a scientist wanting to see like what possibilities are out there, and getting to your point about more abstract kind of concepts, you know, how have other colleagues dealt with that? I wonder if there's a resource for that.
That's a terrific idea and issue that you raised, and it is expressly one of the issues that was raised. I mentioned, and I keep referring to the Environmental Research and Education Advisory Committee. In fact, when we met with them last fall, they've had other meetings since then, they specifically recommended that NSF-wide, there's some pockets of the foundation that do this, and we're working to address that. But their recommendation was that NSF promote as broadly and equally broader impacts stories, if you will, as we do the scientific stories that display the intellectual merit. And that's just an excellent and very sound recommendation. And we're working towards doing that, and working with our Office of Legislative and Public Affairs. I don't know if any of their representatives are here, but that's been recommended, and so you're raising it again only, you know, strengthens that idea.
Thank you, Dr. Ward, for your wonderful stuff.
Thank you all.